Hey everyone, I've been doing some more tests on the Perfect Day animal-free dairy proteins, specifically with Koolhaas ice cream compared to Haagen-Dazs dairy ice cream. I've been talking a lot about very recently and how I think Haagen-Dazs is not going to be able to compete in the future with these new products. And a lot of this has just been hunches as I've been personally tasting ice cream. None of it's really scientifically proven. And I'm starting to do some more tests that are slightly more scientific. And the more I look into this and the more tests I do, the more impressed I am at how good this animal free dairy whey protein is. And it's going to completely change the game for the dairy industry. And Haagen-Dazs and other premium ice creams, and really every ice cream, I think is going to have, every dairy ice cream at least, is really going to have a hard time competing with animal-free dairy. And the more I look at it, the more bullish I am in this company. And so this video is a very, very nerdy look at the very technical details of how ice cream actually works. And I'm going to walk you through some of the tests that I've been doing. So let's get into the video. This is just why I'm so impressed that we are on the same level with dairy ice cream. So with Haagen-Dazs, one of the biggest criteria that must be met that allows Haagen-Dazs to have a high price for their product centers around what they call overrun. So if you want to run with the super premium ice cream group, then your overrun needs to be less than 50%. Why is the overrun ratio so important? The lower ratios mean fewer ice crystals. So this produces a denser, creamier, and richer texture and taste. So with super premium ice creams, you're getting less air and more product. If you were to compare the weight of this ice cream with the competition, you would realize that you're actually getting more bang for your buck. Okay, so overrun is just the ice cream, a term they use in the industry for like how much air is in their ice cream. And so the pleasure of eating it depends on the smoothness and the creaminess throughout the shelf life. So of course, like the recipe processing parameters determine this to a large extent, but they're not the only factors affecting the quality of the product experienced by consumers. During transportation and storage, for example, there's a high risk of heat shock and therefore a loss of quality. So ice cream is a complex system of foam containing gas, air, dispersed as small bubbles. Air is an important component in ice cream, affecting its physical and sensory properties, as well as its stability during storage. Overrun refers to the degree of expansion resulting from the amount of air incorporated into the product during the freezing process. Ice cream normally has an overrun of around 100%, meaning that air makes up 50% of its volume. The amount of air incorporated into the mix influences sensory attributes. With less air, the resulting ice cream is dense and heavy and feels colder to eat. With more, the texture is lighter and creamier and feels less cold. So this would also explain some of the differences between ice creams and gelatos. So a major benefit of low overrun is that ice cream you get is going to be silky and rich, but it'll also be quite dense. Ice creams with higher overrun tend to have a foamier, lightweight texture to them. Okay, so we have four major categories of ice cream. Economy is under 100% overrun. Regular is around 100% overrun. Premium, so Haagen-Dazs, Ben & Jerry's, has under 50% overrun. Super premium, the overrun can go as low as 20%. And so the butterfat content then is up to 18%, whereas in like Haagen-Dazs, Ben & Jerry's, we're up to 15% or 16%. So if a frozen dairy product doesn't fit the bill for the technical definition of ice cream, it can still be sold, it's just labeled frozen dessert. So that term can encompass the use of plant-based products like non-dairy milk or other artificial ingredients. To test this, we're going to follow, there's a website here, machineryworld.com, and I found that they have a handy calculator. So it's 4 steps. Essentially, we're going to place an empty container on the scale, zero out the reading. I'm going to do this backwards. So then we're going to fill the container with the frozen product and then place it on the scale to weigh the frozen mixture. And then final step is we're going to melt everything and place the unfrozen liquid mix. It'll be filled up to the brim. We'll place it on the scales and then weigh that. And then finally, we're going to use this formula here to calculate the overrun of the final product. So just a bit about the science behind it. Because when water freezes, it expands. And so we're trying to calculate the amount of air in the product, and we do that by looking at the full container with frozen product, and then like if you were to melt that, it would actually, the level would go down, the volume would go down. And so we're just trying to measure the difference between how much product is actually in a full container when it's ice or when it's liquid. Okay, so we are going to fill up this with the frozen dessert and weigh it. We're going to level it off, and then we're going to melt some dessert, pour it in here. Weigh it. So the weight of this is 33.49 grams. Now we're going to take the Haagen-Dazs and fill that up with frozen dessert, and then weigh that. We've now filled up our container and leveled it with the Haagen-Dazs green tea ice cream. Zero that out and add this on top. Okay, so we're 86.59 grams. Now we're going to let that melt, and while we do that, I'm going to prepare the Koolhaas Hojicha in the same way. So we're going to fill it up, fill this, level it out, and then we'll weigh that. For anyone who's wondering, these are both 100 ml ice creams, and this is a 6, you probably can't see that, but this is a 60 ml cup, quarter cup. One thing I can say is I've eaten a ton of ice cream doing these tests. Here we have our Koolhaas Hojicha leveled off. Let's weigh it. Okay, 81.60 grams. Perfect. Now we're going to melt this as well and then weigh both of the liquids. We're looking at the animal dairy Haagen-Dazs green tea ice cream and the Koolhaas animal-free dairy Hojicha is a toasted Japanese tea, so they're both tea ice creams. And I picked these two flavors, A, because they're both tea, so I can do a bit of comparison on the flavor. They both have, none of them have the exact same tea flavor, but we can test a little bit of that. And then I'm also wanting to make sure that the ice creams I'm testing are not containing other ingredients. So if we have pecans or chocolates or other ingredients that aren't just pure ice cream, then that's gonna change how you would do our overrun calculations. So I really just want pure cream from both companies, and these are the only two flavors that are similar and don't have additional ingredients like the cookies and cream ice cream would. So we can best calculate that. And we're expecting that Haagen-Dazs is a premium brand, and so they should have really around 50% or less. Overrun And then what I want to know is this ice cream comparable to Haagen-Dazs? My taste tests, I like this one better, but how does it actually stack up when we look at the numbers? We've now melted the Haagen-Dazs. So we're going to fill this up again with the melted liquid and then weigh that. Okay, we've now filled this to the brim. Okay, let's zero this out. Alright, so we're at 88.41 grams. We have leveled this off as well. Oh, that's not spill. I feel like we can add just a bit more. Just to prove that's how our measurement is. Okay, so we're gonna say 86.76. Here are our test results. Now, this is by no means statistically valid because I've done 3 tests, but for my personal interest purposes, it gives us a good look at where things are. I'm really surprised by this. So we have test 1, Haagen-Dazs animal dairy versus Cool House animal-free dairy. So we weighed the container, then we weighed the ice cream inside the container. So this is then the amount minus the container. So this is the actual weight of the ice cream. Then we weighed our container again when we melted, put the liquid in there, and then again this is the full measurement minus container measurement, which gives us the amount of the liquid. And then here we can see our formula. So we have 54%, just under 55% overrun for test 1 for Haagen-Dazs, and Cool House was just over 53%. Then the second test, Haagen-Dazs just under 60%, Cool House just over 52%. Then test 3, Haagen-Dazs slightly over 60% and Cool House a bit over 51%. So Cool House won because lower is technically more premium. In terms of this test, Cool House has won every single test. On average, we're about 5-6% better. Now you can argue these numbers all you want. Again, we probably want to do like hundreds of tests in order to get something statistically valid, but even if we say my error rate is, let's say, 5%, Cool House is still winning. I think the main point I want to make is that animal-free dairy is now just as good, if not better, than animal dairy, and this fits in my personal taste tests, and this is also showing up in these numbers as well. So the implications are, in the long term, given how close these two are, where's the inflection point for competition? And so if Haagen-Dazs wants to compete on Overrun, right, so premium ice creams are around 50% or less, and then super premium goes down to as low as 20%. So if you want to increase your Overrun, if you want to lower these numbers, you're going to have to use more premium ingredients. So this is the case both for Haagen-Dazs and Cool House. And actually, Haagen-Dazs wins on ingredients because they don't use emulsifiers or stabilizers like Cool House does. So ingredients is the one place in the one area that they do win on. But they would have to go even more premium, which means passing on the cost to the consumer in order to beat these numbers. Cool House would as well, but when we get to Perfect Day competing, if we're looking at animal-free dairy competing with animal dairy. When we look at this whole idea of food as software, and we're just printing proteins, then there's a lot more room for Perfect Day to make changes than there is for Haagen-Dazs, because they can't change how a cow produces the protein. But we can change how we produce the animal-free dairy protein. So back to ingredients. This is the GRAS notice from the FDA on the Perfect Day protein. And as you can see, it can be used as a texturizer, an emulsifier, and a thickener. So my thesis would be, why can't we replace all of these other texturizers and emulsifiers and stabilizers with just the protein itself and some higher quality ingredients? If you're Haagen-Dazs and you're competing on cost, you would either have to use more inferior ingredients, or you would have to pressure your suppliers to reduce their costs of milk production. And generally speaking, milk production is pretty much as efficient as it's going to get. We have all the robotics, the automation for milking a cow. We've pretty much made as efficient as we can in terms of how to actually raise a cow. And most things in the dairy supply chain are now as efficient as they can possibly be. So we can't actually, there's not a lot of room to pressure supplies to reduce costs, because it's already as cheap as it's ever going to get. With animal-free dairy, we're only starting on that cost curve. And so these companies have only started manufacturing these proteins, and so it's still very expensive, right? Like we learned in the All in Pod episode, grams per liter per day. So how efficient can you make your microbe that's going to then produce these proteins, and how many grams per liters per day can you get out of your production process? The better you can make those numbers, the more protein you can produce for the same cost. And so that then reduces the cost of these proteins. So over time, as we ride down the cost curve, as we improve our production efficiency, as we produce more of these proteins, as we scale up, as we figure out how to increase the grams per liter per day number by making better bioreactors, whatever needs to be done, that cost is going to continue to decline. And so there's a ton more room to actually reduce those costs. And so I predict Haagen-Dazs will be making the switch purely for economic reasons, because they're going to see this and they're going to realize if they don't make this switch, other companies are going to do it for them, and then we'll take market share. We'll see. Maybe they have the foresight, maybe they don't. I'm really impressed that Perfect Day and Koolhaas has been able to make as good of a product as they have. If I could invest in Perfect Day, I would. I'm Chris. This is Space Foods. We'll see you in the next video.